Looking at the Xperia XZs, we get a strong case of déjà vu. It's almost like we've reviewed the phone before. Almost. This model features nearly identical hardware to last year's Xperia XZ, but it comes with a wicked new camera that supports super slow-mo. So, does the camera justify the release of an entirely new device? Let's find out in our Xperia XZs review. As far as aesthetics go, the Xperia line hasn't changed much over the last couple of generations. The XZs is no exception, and from the outside, it bears a serious family resemblance to the Xperia XZ. The design of these two phones is great to look at and comfortable to use, but is just not as flashy as other phones on the market. Sony is sticking to safe, not revolutionary, but it makes for a solid phone. The XZs is easy to hold thanks to the curved sides. It has a super smooth matte back made of Sony's Alcalido aluminum alloy. There is Gorilla Glass on the front to protect the screen. The phone's got some great build quality and it looks to be very durable. It's also waterproof with an IP68 rating, so you shouldn't have any problem using it in any weather, even if certain colleagues were to lock you outside during a storm. But we digress. There are a few things we're glad to see on the Xperia XZs, such as the 3.5mm audio jack, the USB-C port, and the stereo speakers. They're front-facing, but unfortunately they're not as loud as we'd like. There is a fingerprint sensor embedded in the power button, but if you're buying it in the US, the feature is disabled. The reader's accuracy and recognition is superb. Sony hasn't updated the screen for a while, but the 5.2-inch display is fantastic. We only wish the bezels weren't so generous. The screen is sharp and brighter than average, about as bright as the Xperia XZ, and is more legible in direct sunlight than most. The Xperia XZs sports a flagship chipset, and it handles everything without a slowdown. The real upgrade over last year's Xperia XZ is the increased amount of RAM. Apps seem to run just fine, and the phone didn't get hot when we played games on it. However, when using the camera for extended periods of time, it heats up quite quickly. Base storage comes as either 32 or 64 gigabytes, and it's a good thing you can expand it with a microSD card, as the system takes about 15 gigabytes out of the box. You can open the SIM slot without any tools, but it's annoying that the phone restarts when you pop the card tray open, even when there's no card inside. The battery capacity on the Xperia XZs is modest, and it doesn't charge terribly fast. It supports Quick Charge 3.0, but in our tests it only charged up to 40% in half an hour. That's slow considering battery capacity. That may as well be due to several smart charging solutions Sony implemented to help prolong the battery's overall lifespan. In our battery tests, the phone performed admirably, quite on par with the Xperia XZ, and we're happy with the power efficiency. The XZs runs Android Nougat and the system is quite lean. Sony has added a few twists on top of the stock looks. You can download alternative themes if you don't like the default style. You can swipe down on the home screen to search for an app you've installed, or get recommendations for new apps. One thing we do miss is the auto brightness toggle. We're great fans of Sony's apps, which include music, video, album, and lifelog. The music app has Spotify built in, and has a few options for improving audio quality. It can upscale MP3s to sound better, and optimize the sound for your particular headphones. The app can also find the track's video on YouTube, look up info about an artist, or search for lyrics. Albums organizes your photos nicely by month. There's also integration with online albums such as Facebook, Picasa, and Flickr. The lifelog tracks a host of daily activities, including walking, running, and sleeping. It tracks the music you listen to, the photos you take, and the apps you use. And finally, we come to the centerpiece of this phone, the camera. Sony redesigned the entire camera system since the XZ. The pixel size on the new sensor is now almost 20% bigger. Sony also integrated DRAM right into the sensor stack, which allows capturing short video sequences at a whopping 960 frames per second. The redesigned camera has other improvements as well, such as no more rolling shutter when shooting a video, and an all-new predictive capture mode. Predictive capture means the camera starts capturing photos when it detects movement, even before you've clicked the shutter. In our experience, it didn't work as reliably as expected. Still, for an automatic feature, we're happy with the results. The most attention-grabbing camera feature, however, has to be the slow-motion video mode. There are a few limitations that we'd like to get out of the way first. Videos are only 720p, and the field of view is cropped compared to normal videos. You can only slow down really short segments of the normal footage, and even though video quality is generally good, you need plenty of light for such high-speed recording. If the light is not enough, the camera will crank up the ISO and you'll get very noisy footage. Also, the steps required to get to the slow-mo recording mode are a bit complex. Despite these limitations, we had a lot of fun shooting our sample videos. Slow-mo videos aside, we had high hopes for the new camera, especially in corner sharpness, low-light shooting, and dynamic range. These are all areas where Sony smartphones have struggled in recent years. Unfortunately, the real-life results disappointed us in at least a few of these aspects. The processing, including the colors, has not changed since the Xperia XZ. Just as before, there's a considerable amount of noise and noise reduction artifacts. And despite the claims that they have a redesigned lens, we still saw corner softness on many of our photos. The night shots, for one, came out softer than expected. Things looked pretty decent when we used a tripod and the dedicated slow shutter mode, but in auto mode, even the photos by the Xperia XZ were a bit sharper than these. That said, we can applaud Sony for delivering class-leading detail and sharpness in good light, even with the low-resolution sensor. Superior Auto is as great as usual in recognizing the correct scene preset. The autofocus is fast too. Panorama taking experience was finally improved to match the competition in resolution and user experience. 4K videos have plenty of detail, great contrast, and accurate colors. There is no corner softness here. They may not look super sharp overall, but that's due to the laid-back processing without much sharpening. Footage is practically noise-free, and it looks natural. We can also praise the dynamic range. So, to wrap things up, for good or for bad, the new Sony camera is as good as last year's. We do appreciate the new features such as slow-mo videos, the predictive capture, and the improved panorama capabilities. But these are hardly must-haves, and we wish Sony had taken this chance to upgrade some of the phone's other features to make it more competitive. In fact, if you own any of last year's flagships, including the Xperia XZ, you have to be really desperate for slow-mo video recording in order to shell out the money needed for an upgrade. And the Xperia XZs does not come cheap. Not that any of the competing phones do. For this amount of money, you get a great camera and a great screen, an excellent chipset, waterproofing, and 2-day battery life. It's just that last year's Xperia XZ is not that different, or should we say, any worse than the XZs. And by going for it, you can save some serious cash. Regardless which of these two phones you go for, you'll be getting a phone with a classy, timeless design that easily stands out in the sea of phones coming from China. The Xperia XZs might not be a phone that surprises you, but it can surely delight you day after day. That's all for our Xperia XZs review. Thanks for watching. Make sure you check out our detailed text review over at gsmarena.com.